The ancient Ram Inn possesses a genuinely chilling aura, not to mention a reputation that is so menacing that many local people won't even walk past it at night. The building is thought to date from around 1145, and it has been suggested that the workmen who built the parish church opposite were lodged here. It served for a time as a priest's house, before converting to an inn. Its last pint was pulled in 1968. Once it had closed for business, John Humphreys purchased the building from the brewery. He fought a perpetual battle to save the historic structure, right up until his death in 2017, irrespective of the endeavors by former residents to interfere as much as possible. The moment you enter the old inn, an aura of dreadful foreboding envelopes you. The bare walls, creaking floorboards, steep stairs and mysterious shadows are sufficient to elicit the coldest of shivers, whilst the legions of ghost stories that come marching from its mist-shrouded past can chill the blood of even the most steadfast cynic. The atmosphere was awful, is how one visitor put it. I can only describe it as pure filth, dark and heavy. The first room that visitors encounter is the men's kitchen. This reputedly stands on the site of a pagan burial ground, and the disturbing sound of a baby crying is often heard here. People ascending the steep staircase up to the first floor have been thrown up the stairs by invisible hands. A photograph taken here in June 1999 showed a mysterious white mist, about the height of a human, ascending the staircase. On the first floor is the Ram's most haunted and terrifying room, the bishop's room. A medium pushing open its door was once lifted off the ground and flung across the corridor. The atmosphere inside is oppressive and disturbing. A ghostly cavalier has been known to materialize by the dressing table and stride purposefully across to the opposite wall. 2 monks have been seen shimmering in one corner. Witnesses have heard the terrified screams of a man who was, reputedly, murdered here by having his head thrust into the fire. A phantom shepherd and his dog have been seen near the door, whilst those who spend the night in the room have often attracted the lustful attentions of either an incubus or a succubus. Rather a lot for one room, observed John Humphreys to me with decided understatement. Climbing into the attic and crouching beneath the roof timbers, a feeling of intense melancholy appears to hang in the air. An innkeeper's daughter is said to have been murdered in this roof space in the early 1500s, and people attempting to sleep in the bishop's room below often hear the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor above their heads. There is little doubt that the spirits and demons that reside within the walls of the ancient Ram Inn are extremely active. It is a place where nightmares abound, and is certainly not for those of a nervous disposition. But to cross its threshold is to step back in time, and the chance of an encounter with one of its many ghosts is not to be missed. The Monte Cristo homestead was once grand and new, but it has fallen into ruin after decades of neglect. Vandals stripped lead from the roof and broke all the windows. Squatters pulled up floorboards and burned them in the fireplace. In 1963, Olive and Reginald Ryan purchased the rundown mansion in Junee, Australia, and began to repair it. Late one evening, after a shopping trip to pick up building supplies, they returned home to an astonishing sight. Bright light streams from every door and window. That seems impossible. The house has no electricity. The Ryans think burglars are inside. Or maybe squatters returned. They tell their kids to stay in the car. Then, as they approach to investigate, the lights vanish. They find no one inside. This is only the first of many unnerving experiences for the Ryans and their 5 children. They regularly hear footsteps walking across an upstairs balcony, and sometimes see a woman in white standing there. Olive feels hands resting on her shoulders when no one is there. Reginald hangs a picture, then finds it fallen on the floor but unbroken, 2 nights in a row. And in the most disturbing incident of all, one evening one of their daughters goes to check on her sleeping little brother and sees an elderly man in old-fashioned clothes standing at the end of his bed. They regularly hear footsteps walking across an upstairs balcony. She races off, screaming to her family about a man in the house. But they find no one. The little brother, Lawrence Ryan, learns about this incident as a teenager, then moves out of the main house to a different bedroom. He says, "I always felt like someone was watching me in that room." Was that someone a ghost? Christopher William Crawley, the wealthy and powerful founder of the town of Junee, once lived in the mansion with his wife, children, and numerous servants. The family hosted fancy balls and played tennis and golf in the grounds. Crawley died in the home at the age of 69 after a boil on his neck got infected. After his death, the locals say, His wife almost never left the house. She died there at the age of 92. But the property's creepy history began long before their deaths. According to local lore, a young maid fell from the balcony to her death. She was rumored to be pregnant at the time, and some believe she was killed to cover up that fact. Could she be the source of the footsteps and female figure on the balcony? I always felt like someone was watching me in that room. Another servant, a stable boy, supposedly suffered lethal burns when his straw mattress was set on fire. The Crawleys' youngest child, a baby daughter named Magdalena, died in a fall down the stairs. Some think her nanny may have dropped her on purpose. Could the spirits of all of these people still haunt the place where they died? If you believe in ghosts, you're not alone. A 2017 poll found that around half of Americans believe that places can be haunted by spirits. Polls in many other countries around the world produce similar results. Belief in ghosts depends on what you think happens after death. The physical body perishes, but what happens to your consciousness? Are you gone forever? Many people believe in a soul or something similar that survives past death. Or do you continue to experience this world, or another world in some way? Many people believe in a soul or something similar that survives past death. It's not a huge step from the idea of an afterlife to the belief that spirits may influence the world of the living. However, people from different cultures tell very different stories about how and why ghosts appear. In ancient Mesopotamia, people believed that sickness was a punishment inflicted by spirits of the dead. In Mexico and parts of Central America, everyone knows the legend of La Llorona, the weeping woman. In one version of the story, she drowned her own children and now haunts riverbanks, calling and crying for them. In China and parts of Southeast Asia today, many people ask the spirits of their ancestors for blessings. During the Hungry Ghost Festival, people in this region burn paper or incense and leave out gifts, food, tea, and sweets. They believe that these offerings will please the ghosts and help prevent bad luck. Ghost stories can be fascinating, scary, and memorable. But they are just stories. Only physical evidence could show that ghosts are real. People who call themselves ghost hunters or paranormal investigators search for this evidence. Some claim to have found it. Ghost hunters often arm themselves with a variety of high-tech equipment, including cameras and audio recorders as well as instruments that measure temperature. Ghosts supposedly create cold spots or detect motion. Electromagnetic field, EMF, meters are especially popular. Cameras may capture still images or videos that show shadowy figures, glowing wisps, or orbs of light. Electromagnetic energy comes in a wide spectrum that includes everything from high-energy X-rays to low-energy radio waves. Visible light falls in the middle of the spectrum. Electricians use EMF meters to detect the energy that electrical wires and devices emit, which is in the radio frequency range. This energy is strongest right next to the source, but weakens rapidly with distance. When EMF readers detect fluctuations, or rising and falling amounts of electromagnetic energy, some think this indicates a ghostly presence. Audio equipment may record what seem to be faint voices saying short phrases, like "get out." Investigators set up their equipment in a haunted location and wait. Often, they find nothing. But occasionally, they record something unusual. Cameras may capture still images or videos that show shadowy figures, glowing wisps or orbs of light. Audio equipment may record what seem to be faint voices saying short phrases, like "get out." This is called electronic voice phenomenon, or EVP for short. An EMF meter may fluctuate wildly, indicating a source of energy. These recordings seem intriguing. But are they really evidence of ghosts? Photos and audio anomalies may seem like convincing evidence. But it's a mistake to jump directly to a supernatural explanation for a strange photo or recording. First, you have to consider all possible practical explanations. Remember the principle of Occam's razor? Simple explanations that make the fewest possible assumptions are always the most likely to be true. When it comes to photographs, many things other than ghosts can explain haunting images. In the 1860s, photographer William H. Mumler captured images that seemed to show deceased relatives hovering over living family members. His most famous image shows a ghostly Abraham Lincoln with his hands on the shoulders of his widow, Mary Todd Lincoln. The photo was taken a few years after the American president's assassination. During the mid to late 19th century in America, many people who called themselves spiritualists believed that the dead could communicate with the living. Special ceremonies called séances were held in an attempt to talk to the dead. People also used Ouija boards, which look like game boards covered in letters and numbers, to channel what seemed to be messages from spirits. Many people believed that the dead could communicate with the living. Spiritualists believed that Mumler's photos were the real deal, but others accused him of fraud. In very early cameras, a sensitive glass plate captured the image. If this plate was not cleaned well enough, a faint image from a previous photograph might show up in the background of a new photo. Mumler later admitted that one of his first ghost photos happened accidentally, when he forgot to clean a plate. Others were likely deliberate hoaxes. Many modern ghost images are also the result of mistakes, technical glitches, or deliberate hoaxes. If a person moves quickly past a camera while a photo is being taken, for example, the image may show a blurry streak. Flash photographs often capture mysterious orbs of light. Some call these spirit energy. More likely, the flash reflected off dust or water droplets on or near the lens. Some ghost images are not technical glitches but psychological ones. For example, a photo from the Monte Cristo Homestead seems to show the baby Magdalena's face in a mirror. Most likely, it is not a face at all, but a random reflection that happens to resemble a face. So sometimes the brain finds faces where there are none. To experience this for yourself, take a look at the moon the next time it's full. Do you see a face? Many people do. People also regularly see familiar shapes in clouds. This phenomenon is called pareidolia. It happens because it's very important for the brain to identify familiar patterns, like faces. So sometimes the brain finds faces where there are none. Similarly, the brain may find words in static or random noise. This is the most likely explanation in many examples of EVP. In other cases, the audio equipment may have captured distant voices or music that were too faint for human ears to hear. Ghost hunting teaches the important lesson that using technical equipment does not make an investigation scientific. Anomalies in data only seem like evidence of ghosts, because that's what ghost hunters are looking for. Noah Lee has led the paranormal investigators of Milwaukee Group for over 10 years. When his group hunts for EVPs, they ask a question, then leave 10 seconds of silence to allow for an answer. They use strict procedures to help rule out noise from growling stomachs, squeaky doors, and other background sounds. He says, "In all our years doing this, we've never had a direct response to a question, ever. If a haunted location isn't really home to wandering spirits of the dead, then why do so many people have strange experiences at a place like the Monte Cristo Homestead? What makes a house haunted?" Scientists have proposed some intriguing theories. Some blame infrasound. These sounds are too low to hear, but the body feels their vibrations. In some people, these vibrations may cause feelings of uneasiness or fear. Others have studied how electromagnetic fields affect the brain. In some people, these vibrations may cause feelings of uneasiness or fear. In people with a certain form of epilepsy, a part of the brain, called the temporal lobe, malfunctions, causing visions that are often religious in nature. Some scientists have studied whether electromagnetic fields might trigger the same effect in people without epilepsy. The fields may come from natural sources, such as minor earthquakes or tremors. Or they might come from power lines, mobile phones, appliances, and other devices. However, experimentation has shed doubt on these theories. In 2004, psychologist Christopher French and his colleagues at Goldsmiths University of London attempted to create a haunted room. They set up and hid devices that would generate electromagnetic fields and infrasound. One by one, 79 volunteers entered the room, a cool, dimly lit, empty, white, circular space, and stayed there for 50 minutes. The researchers told the volunteers they might have some unusual sensations and asked them to record any such experiences. The researchers told the volunteers they might have some unusual sensations and asked them to record any such experiences. Some volunteers got bombarded with electromagnetic fields and infrasound, others with one or the other, and a control group with nothing. But it didn't matter which group a volunteer was in. People in the control group were just as likely to report weird sensations as people in the other groups. What was going on? After everyone left the room, they all completed a personality test. Suggestible people, those who easily accept what others tell them to do or believe, tend to get high scores on a certain part of the test. Everyone who reported strange experiences also got high scores on this part of the test. So they seem to have experienced strange things in the room, not because of energy fields or vibrations, but because the researchers told them they would. In other words, people experience strange things in haunted houses because they're expecting strange things to happen. Alternately, someone who experiences strange things may turn to ghosts as a fitting explanation. This is similar to what happens in many alien and UFO experiences. The things people see are created in the brain and do not always represent reality. A hallucination, vivid dream, or even a trick of the light may seem like a real encounter with a ghost. So what about the Monte Cristo homestead? Today, Lawrence Ryan leads ghost tours there. But we may never know what really happened in the haunted mansion. Some of the tragic deaths may not actually have occurred, or may not have been murders. It's often impossible to go back and find out the truth about events that happened many years ago. Even if murders did occur, these stories likely only serve to make visitors more uneasy and primed for unusual experiences. Joe Nickell is a detective who has spent his entire career looking for realistic explanations for events that seem paranormal. It doesn't matter what you and I believe, he says. It matters what we have evidence for. He has investigated many reportedly haunted places. In one of his first cases, he discovered that the footsteps people heard on a haunted staircase came from a very real iron staircase located in the building next door. Leap Castle is said to be the most haunted castle in Ireland. It has had a horrific history, with each passing century being punctuated by ferocious acts of violence. One of the most gruesome murders to take place in the castle occurred in 1532 in a room above the main hall of the castle, which is now known as the Bloody Chapel, and this is the room featured in this photograph. The original castle is thought to have been built circa 1250, and was the principal seat of the fearsome Ely O'Carroll clan. In the aftermath of the death of the chieftain Mulroney O'Carroll in 1532, a bitter succession dispute arose over the leadership of the clan. The dispute came to an abrupt end when one-eyed Joe Carroll, who as Mass was being celebrated in the room, stormed in chanting holy rites and drove a sword into the back of the priest, who was also his older brother Thaddeus. The fatally wounded priest fell onto the altar in front of his family and breathed his last. The priest's spirit is said to haunt the Bloody Chapel and is thought to be one of Leap's earliest ghosts. Even centuries later, when the castle lay in state of ruin, passers-by have seen the window of the room light up suddenly late into the night. In 1922, workmen at Leap Castle found an oubliette in a secret dungeon hidden behind a wall in a corner of the Bloody Chapel. When they explored the sinister dark hole further, they made a horrific discovery. There were enough human skeletons amassed on top of wooden spikes that it would take 3 cartloads to remove them. Prisoners, or unsuspected guests, of the O'Carrolls would have been dropped down through the hidden trapdoor above the oubliette, where they would have had their lungs punctured by the wooden spikes below. There they would be left to die a horrific death within earshot of their gracious hosts and their merriment below. One of the most infamous killings that took place at Leap Castle was also one of the most treacherous. About 40 members of the Northern McMahon clan had been hired by the O'Carrolls to train them in new methods of warfare. The McMahon men attended a feast at the castle in celebration of a victory over a rival clan of the O'Carrolls. However, the mercenaries were totally unaware that their ruthless employers had poisoned their food so as to avoid having foot the bill. The ghosts of the McMahon clan are said to haunt Leap Castle to this day. In the 1600s, the ownership of Leap Castle passed to the Darby family when the daughter of the O'Carroll chieftain fell in love with an English Captain Darby. Their son Jonathan Darby hid vast treasures in the grounds of the castle during the English Civil War. The 2 servants who helped him seclude his riches were later murdered to guarantee their silence. Darby was later to be imprisoned for treason, and when released years later, the turmoil of his time in captivity was such that he was unable to locate his treasure. It is said that the hoard remains undiscovered to this day. It was during the 18th century that Jonathan's great-grandson, also named Jonathan Darby, had the castle remodeled to give it a Gothic appearance. It was one of the Darbys who is believed to have brought the most infamous and evil spirit to Leap Castle. In the early 1900s, the occult was a fashionable pastime for the gentry, and Mildred Darby begun dabbling in the black arts in Leap with terrifying results. She is credited with unleashing an elemental spirit to the castle a type of primitive ghost that attaches itself to a particular place. It can be malevolent, terrifying, and unpredictable. She herself described her ordeal in a 1909 article for the journal Occult Review. "I was standing in the gallery looking down at the main floor when I felt somebody put a hand on my shoulder. The thing was about the size of a sheep. Thin, gauntling, shadowy. Its face was human, to be more accurate, inhuman. Its lust in its eyes, which seemed half decomposed in black cavities, stared into mine. The horrible smell, 100 times intensified, came up into my face, giving me a deadly nausea. It was the smell of a decomposing corpse." Her foray into the black arts awakened this elemental, which made its presence felt within the castle with a ferocious intensity for much of the following century. Leap was burnt out and destroyed in 1922 by the IRA, while the Darbys were living in England. The castle lay in ruins until it was purchased by the current owners Sean and Anne Ryan in 1991. Sean has restored the castle, and was a most gracious host when I called to visit Leap to take these photographs. Sean has frequent sightings of the numerous spirits of Leap, but thankfully the Ryans have never encountered the elemental, who for now seems to have retreated. Despite some early skirmishes, he has found that his family and the resident spirits have been able to coexist quite happily at Leap. After all, in terms of the vast and turbulent history of the castle, it is he who is just passing through.